What You Don't Get with a Sat-Nav by Mark Spruce, written in 2017. The Sat-Nav, modern saviour of the geographically challenged motorist. A boon, a benefit, a time saver, a stress reducer. Well, maybe. Recently, I had to make a journey from Exeter, Devon to Letchworth, Hertfordshire. Checking the sat-nav, I was given the following information. Up the M5 to Bristol, east on the M4 to the M25, round the M25 to the A1, then north on the A1 to junction 9. Total distance, 227.6 miles. Journey time, 3 hours 53 minutes. The machine quickly produced for me clear, concise instructions for my impending journey. It's wonderful, but somehow completely dull and soulless. I had plenty of time for the journey, so instead I got out my old AA Road Atlas, remember them, to look at other possibilities. In 1980, my parents moved from Wiltshire to Devon whilst I was away at Polytechnic. Remember them. Back in the 1980s, I'd often travelled the winding single carriageway A30, A303 between the two counties, but I'd not been on that route for many years. I made the decision there and then to make my journey to Letchworth by that once old familiar route. Setting off at 9:30 that morning, I quickly got onto the M5 for one junction and then turned off on the A30 eastbound. Almost immediately, a flood of memories from only a few years ago entered my head. I'd driven the short stretch of road to Ottery St Mary several times to visit my partner's mother. At that time, we were both recently separated and both in the turmoil of bitter divorces. That short stretch of road was the pathway to a temporary safe haven and a place of acceptance. The recollections of the emotional turmoil of those times ran through me as I passed the exit I'd once taken. The relationship sadly did not last, and the poignancy of all the unfulfilled hopes from that period ran through me, as did the thought I'd never take that exit again. I drove on. Past Ottery St Mary, I was on a road I'd not travelled for many years, but I quickly found myself on stretches that were all too familiar from years gone by. I passed once familiar roadside pubs and garages, some now sadly closed, others just as I remember them. North of Honiton, I suddenly found myself rounding a bend, and for a brief second on my right I passed the Monkton Court Hotel. Seeing that building brought back another flood of memories. It was there my wife and I stopped for tea on our way down to our honeymoon in Cornwall. It was 1984, and we'd only been married a matter of hours. We were giddy with excitement, completely in love, and two very young people setting out onto a new adult world. For a briefer second, I thought of the ghosts of those two happy young people walking through the door of that building, and then flashed forward to the way that marriage ended 25 years later. This was turning out to be quite an emotional journey. A little further on, my mood lifted considerably when I saw once familiar road signs to exotically named villages I remembered passing all those years ago. Places like Kingsbury Episcopi, Norton sub Hamden and Shepton Beauchamp. Wonderful, eccentric place names that made me smile at their recollection. I've never visited any of them, but I thought with names like those they must be picture postcard English villages, and that is the way they will always remain, in my imagination at least. The A30 became the A303, and the road continued on from Somerset and over the border into Wiltshire, my old home county. The landscape began to change. Fields became massive and stretched to the horizon. On either side of the road, increasingly, I could see sheep grazing on short grassed downlands, pockmarked by ancient sentinel barrows that blistered the landscape. Clay gave way to chalk. Brick cottages gave way to those made of flint. I crossed shallow chalk streams and passed large black wooden barns with thatched roofs resting 2 feet off the ground on Staddlestones. This was the land of my youth, and its familiarity enveloped me in an emotional blanket of comfort and warmth. I'd have missed all this if I'd taken the M4. Passing Stonehenge and seeing the people crowded around the perimeter wire, I briefly remembered an old Kodachrome picture of myself and my sister, aged about 5 and 3, standing on one of the stones. Fawn shorts, long socks, leather sandals, a little brown coat, and a terrible haircut. Both of us smiling in the sunshine. Another brief and poignant memory from my life. Back then, in the 1960s, the public could still walk on, around and through the ancient stones. I drove on. Passing beyond Wiltshire and into Hampshire, the road gradually became less familiar. Beyond Andover, I struck north on the A43 to Newbury, and from there onto the M4 and the route prescribed by the sat-nav. The rest of the journey was efficiently dull, and I eventually arrived in Letchworth, having negotiated traffic jams around Slough and further hold-ups on the M25. It was later that evening I reflected on the journey I'd taken that day and what I would have missed if I'd followed the advice of the sat-nav. The route I chose to take had given me so much more than just a way of getting me to my destination. It had taken me on an emotional journey of highs and lows, memories recounted, reflections on my past lives, poignant in places and joyous in others. I was enormously grateful for the decision I'd made. I guess in a way this follows a similar theme to my previous Sprucecast, Walking the Contours, about going your own way, choosing your own unprescribed route and the rewards it can bring. Wouldn't it be wonderful if the sat-nav was intelligent enough to provide a emotional route option? Well, that's never going to happen. So all I can say in the end is sometimes it's good to take the illogical route and follow our hearts, not our heads. The rewards can be so much greater. Sprucecasts, an eclectic collection of anecdotes, reflections and stories by Mark Spruce.